Chapter 11. Boomers version 2.0. You would think with all the problems millennials have endured because of poor leadership on the part of their elders, they would make darn sure not to repeat those mistakes again. And if we are to believe the cycle of bad times creating good men, those hard times should be forging millennials into some of the strongest men today. But as the millennials are now approaching the average age of 30, there is no galvanizing of steel, no forming of diamonds, and no forging of strong men. They're honestly starting to look like a repeat of the boomers. And the reason why is the millennials are not as bad as the boomers. They're worse. Whatever the many and legitimate criticisms we may have of the baby boomers, the millennials are just as guilty, if not more so, of the same mistakes and sins of their boomer parents. Boomers majored in laughably stupid degrees, but the millennials went into crippling levels of debt for them. Boomers chose their careers over their children, but millennials demand the government raise and take care of theirs. Professor boomers screwed millennials over with worthless degrees, but that hasn't stopped millennial professors from doing the same to Gen Z. Boomers protested against war, while millennials literally protest against having to work for a living, BGI, bailouts, etc. No matter how much of a dirty hippie a boomer was in the 60s, at least he wasn't shitting in the streets of Portland and San Francisco like his millennial brethren do today. And at least the boomers protested to protect the freedom of speech. Millennials are the only generation of Americans to actively stifle free speech, censoring people via cancel culture and doxing. It's hard to one-up the boomers at boomerang, but by God if the millennials didn't pull it off. Still, shitting in the streets and fighting against free speech is not the worst thing the millennials have done. It's ruining their children's lives. Because just like parent boomers refuse to raise their children, millennials are repeating the same mistake, just worse. And just as parent boomers made their kids' lives a living hell, so too are the millennials. Letting kids shit their pants until they're 4, letting them run around restaurants making noise, getting kicked out of apartments because they let their kids scream all the time, never spanking them, always timeouts, and trying to morally reason with their 2-year-olds as to why we don't spit on Uncle Tommy, as if the child was Socrates. You don't need to be a child psychologist to know how this ends up. The children of millennials will suffer the same fate once they enter the real world. It's just their children will be even more maladapted to society because their millennial parents will have been that much worse as parents. And this is the bright side of millennial parenting. Like boomers, millennials have also doped up their kids to excuse their poor parenting, oftentimes being on the same drug as their kids. There's parents who obsess about politics, raising their 6-year-old to be an environmentalist or a feminist when the kid just wants to play with his toys. This is, of course, better than being so obsessed about gender identity politics that you try to raise your kid as a different gender instead of letting your child choose when the time comes. But even that's better than being so obsessed with your millennial political religion that you put your kids on hormone-blocking drugs to show how open-minded and accepting you are to other demented parents. And then there's the occasional infant who dies in the news because his vegan parents wouldn't feed him meat or protein. This certainly isn't the majority of millennials, but they do have a monopoly on putting their millennial political religion ahead of their children, even to the point that they kill some of them. An indication that parenting is getting worse, not better. We can go on about the failings of the millennials, but the larger point is the millennials learned nothing from the mistakes of both their parents and themselves. They learned nothing from getting hoodwinked by their professors and bosses. They learned nothing from being latchkey kids. They learned nothing from their empirical failures in life. And in learning nothing from either the boomers or themselves, millennials are not only doomed to repeat these mistakes, but guarantee future generations will do the same. This is the real reason we need to figure out why the boomers were so bad at raising the next generation, and why the millennials are continuing this legacy. Because if we don't, we damn all future generations into becoming millennials. We damn them to having no futures at all. Thankfully, we touched on the answer previously, highlighting the 4 main ulterior motives that drove the boomers' poor choices and decisions. Laziness, profit, self-love, and politics. But there is something more universal and fundamental that is driving these behaviors. Something inherent to human nature and immune to all facts, reason, logic, evidence, and even morality. Something so strong, it even compels people to act against the best interest of their own children. And if we can identify this core problem, we can finally understand what's causing this generational decay and stop it from ruining the future. But to understand what that is, we first need to understand a very important concept. And that very important concept is reality. The reality principle. The reality principle is a very simple principle. It states the closer you base your decisions to reality, the more effective and successful you will be. For example, if I am on top of a cliff and I wish to jump off of it and fly, That decision is not based in reality, and I am guaranteed to fail. But if I have a hang glider attached to me and I decide I will fly with a hang glider, that is based in reality, and so I will likely succeed. However, the reality principle is more of a continuum of success versus failure than it is a strict rule of pass-fail. If I am a woman and looking to date someone and spend time at the gym, diet right, put on a nice dress, and show up on time for my date, but accidentally burp while having dinner, it's not a perfect performance, but you're close enough to the target that you'll likely have success. But if I'm overweight, I stuff my face with carne asada and fries, have another man's child, and expect the man to like me for my master's in sociology, I'm still too far from the target of reality to have any success. And so, if you fail at something, it behooves an individual to do some research to assess reality as precisely as possible so that their decisions might be more effective in the future. Regardless of the example, the logical conclusion of this principle is that you want to eternally strive to know precisely what reality is, so you don't waste your time or resources. You want to know what the truth is because you want the most success in life. And the only way your choices and actions will result in success is if they are based in reality/truth, or the closest approximation possible of it. However, what's great about the reality principle is how absolute and simple it is. If you base your decisions in reality, you will be successful, simply because you have no other choice, because reality is reality. There is no alternative. You only hurt yourself the further away you get from it, so why not commit to finding out the truth and basing your decisions in it? It's as much of a foregone conclusion as gravity. But undeniable as the reality principle is, even it being the key to all success, it has a huge competitor for the hearts and minds of Americans and people the world over. Lies. Nothing good comes of lies. Matter of fact, they're the cause of all problems, suffering, and evil in this world. But morality aside, lies are bad for another, more practical reason. They're false. They're erroneous. They are the opposite of reality. And so if you base any decisions in them, you violate the reality principle and are thus guaranteed to fail. But despite lies being pretty much the cause of all evil and failures in life, they have an irresistible sales pitch because they appeal to two weaknesses in human nature: laziness and feelings. Everybody is lazy at their core, and everybody has feelings because we are all human. But these two aspects of human nature are not mere flukes within human design or evolutionary eccentricities. They are the two most powerful psychological forces in the human mind, because they served to meet the two basic needs in Maslow's hierarchy of needs: biological and safety needs. Without going into a lengthy bioevolutionary lecture, laziness was critical to survival, because it made the most efficient use of the very limited calories of energy available to us in the past. Prehistoric man had to conserve energy as much as possible, and if he was going to expend it, he had to do so very efficiently and judiciously. Because if he didn't, and expended more calories of energy chasing an antelope than the food it would yield, he'd starve to death very quickly. Feelings and emotions were also critical to survival because humans were not lone wolves. They were, and still are, herd animals. To survive, it exponentially paid to work within a team or a tribe, which would allow for the easier entrapment of food, the specialization of labor, and safety in numbers. But if you didn't get along with the tribe, they would either kill you, banish you, or sell you into slavery, all of which was a death sentence. So when you were liked, loved, or merely accepted, you have positive feelings, because your survival was more guaranteed. This makes lies such a great sell, because it directly plays into the two most powerful forces in the human mind. It either promises something for nothing, which is the definition of laziness, or love, acceptance, popularity within society, which triggers good emotions, or a combination of both. And while we can sit here academically, objectively identifying lies as bad and logically conclude not to believe them, those Darwinistic forces of survival are so strong, it's a lot easier said than done. Thus, lies pit the two most powerful parts of our brains against one another, the logical frontal cortex and that of our instinctual hindbrain. And an epic battle ensues between what we consciously know to be right and what feels instinctually good, no matter how wrong. And if human behavior is any indication as to which one wins in the end, it very clearly and logically is lies. American obesity is clear proof people are choosing ice cream over broccoli. Worthless degrees are clear proof Americans choose laziness over reality. Choosing to do drugs, legal or not, is the lazy way out of dealing with your problems. Every socialist party, including the Democrat Party, is nothing more than a party promising free shit on the backs of others in exchange for votes. Reading dieting books, dieting magazines, dieting blogs, and participating on dieting internet chat rooms, but never actually dieting, is again proof that humans love sweet-tasting lies more than harsh truths. Smoking cigarettes despite the fact that they cause cancer is, again, living a lie. And if there is a testament to how strong lies are against all other forms of human mental strength, it's the fact that so many spouses are obese, proving they love laziness and food more than they love their actual spouse. In short, the majority of people love lies more than anything else in the world, even reality, because laziness and acceptance are the strongest instincts humans have. So strong, in fact, that reality could be staring them right in the face, even threatening them with death, and people will still reject it, no matter how empirical it may be, because they need their lies and their precious fee-fees more. Alas, with such strong underlying instincts, it should come as no surprise that many boomer, Gen X, and millennial parents often threw their children under the bus for their own ulterior motives. It should also come as no surprise that with lies being so popular, other people capitalized on the opportunity to sell them. Professor boomers selling worthless degrees. Psychology boomers selling excuses and false hope. Social scientists telling parents the state can raise their children. Boss boomers lying on job descriptions. Democrats lying to minorities. And Oprah, well, peddling lies to middle-aged women like they were heroin. And this is where the problems of not just the millennials but all of society originate. We tell each other lies because we ourselves are eternally lazy. Nobody wants to work. Nobody wants to put in the effort. We all want to be loved, be accepted, and be popular. But like hell if we're ever going to put in the effort to legitimately achieve or earn those things. And since it's easier to trade one another lies rather than it is hard, productive labor, the country, and the world, has become an environment and economy of lies. So much so that many of us either live in an insane world or are insane ourselves. But as mentioned before, no matter how sweet-tasting the lies, there is a consequence. We violated the inviolable reality principle. And in so doing, and being so far removed from the target of reality, we now suffer the consequences. Highly educated millennials who can't find a living wage job. Disgusting and sexually repulsive spouses who literally love food more than they do their spouse. Parents who love themselves more than their children. 1/4 of the population believing they're mentally ill and are on some kind of drug. All while society decays as a whole, with slower economic growth, more debt, more mental illness, higher suicide rates, and higher mortality rates. But worse, if there's enough lies told and a critical percentage of the population believes them, society will collapse because an economy of lies is not sustainable. And no matter how great it was living under the delusion of those sweet-tasting lies, it will come to an abrupt halt when the electricity doesn't come on, the water doesn't run, cops are nowhere to be seen, and bandits are raping your daughters. But if we have the courage and bravery today to identify these lies and what is going on, we can end the madness now. We can prevent a repeat of the millennial generation, even save them from the miserable lives they have today. We can get kids a quality and employable education by 16 instead of turning them into unemployable indentured servants at 26. We can have children raised under stable nuclear families instead of rotting in the broken homes they are now. We can even have great sex instead of the obligatory chore-like sex that infects most moderately obese bedrooms today. In short, we can usher in a whole new world of not only economic, career, and financial success, but happiness, joy, love, and brotherhood. We only need to commit to reality, strive to figure out what the truth is, and make changes and decisions based in those realities, and be brave enough to point out when the emperor has no clothes. Besides, it's not like society has a choice in the matter. It is reality, after all.